Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Lord Iron. Kicking off the list with Marvel 1602, otherwise known as Earth 311. This Earth takes a bunch of the Marvel characters we love and plops them in the Elizabethan era, and yes, that includes Iron Man. Going by the name Anthony Stark, aka Lord Iron, his armor is powered by quote-unquote lightning bottles, and was created when Anthony was captured in the Holy Land during the English-Spanish Wars and treated rather harshly by the Hulk, resulting in the requirement of the suit just to survive. Anthony is sent on a mission to hunt down Banner in the New World with his technologically advanced suit. Now, look, this suit in comparison to other versions of Iron Man is not the most advanced and powerful suit, and you'd expect that from the time period. But when looked at with the scope of the technology at the time, it's centuries ahead of its time, being nearly on par with the base Iron Man armors, only it has a super sweet lightning sword. Oh yeah! Number 9. Iron Man 2099. In the dark, ultra-capitalist dystopian society of Marvel 2099, Tony Stark is physically long gone. Instead, it's a guy by the name of Sonny Frisco who takes on the mantle of Iron Man. The technology behind Sonny's advanced suit of armor is a full century ahead of Tony Stark's tech, but despite that, the basic range of powers and abilities are curiously the same. Iron Man 2099 flies around at supersonic speeds and generates powerful energy blasts. Plus, he has a metric butt-ton of firepower and gadgets. What I think makes Sonny Frisco better is that the character actually has an advanced intellect comparable to Tony Stark's, or even better with the knowledge of this future world. Sonny built the suit of armor himself, as any Iron Man worth his salt should, and he earned his place on the Avengers team of 2099 in the process. Number 8. Takuya Yamashiro. Instead of being Peter Parker, the Japanese Spider-Man, Spider-Man, is Takuya Yamashiro, a motocross racer and son of astrophysicist Dr. Hiroshi Yamashiro. Unlike most versions of Spider-Man, Takuya was introduced through a live-action Japanese Spider-Man TV show. With that, his character is, one, really popular, but also differs quite a bit. For starters, his spider powers are a little less powerful due to budget constraints for the show, but to make up for that, he utilizes a whole frickin' mech named Leopardon. He uses Leopardon and his spider abilities to fight the Iron Cross Army, which is a group of suspiciously human-looking aliens from an unnamed world who are led by Professor Monster. Yes, I know it's a dumb name, just let it go. Due to his popularity and just how awesome he is, Takuya has become an official character in the multiverse, coming from Earth 51778, fighting against the Inheritors alongside the Spider Army, and he is set to appear in the second animated Spider-Verse movie, which is gonna be great. Number 7. Peter Parker. Fans of this channel may know the special place that Marvel 1602 has in my heart. Written by Neil Gaiman, the story takes tons of familiar heroes and villains and displaces them into an Elizabethan setting. Our friendly neighborhood Spider, being the face of Marvel, obviously got his own 1602 version. In this world, the orphan Peter was raised by his Scottish uncle Benjamin and his wife until one year, on his birthday, Sir Nicholas Fury came to his door. Fury had known Peter's parents and sought Peter to enter into his service, and he became Fury's assistant. Now that alone, a Peter Parker who worked under Nick Fury, is a cool concept. But I think one of my favorite parts about this version of Peter is that he doesn't actually have his spider powers. Throughout the run of the comic, which saw Peter escorting Virginia Dare, visiting the Doctor Strange and Professor X of this world, meeting a ton of royalty, having run-ins with the Hulk, and traveling to the New World, Peter kept almost coming into contact with certain suspicious-looking spiders. It wasn't until the last issue of the initial comic when he was finally bit and gained superpowers. Number 6. Spider-Man Noir. Listen here, see? After seeking out sweet vengeance on the criminal known as the Goblin for taking away the life of his Uncle Ben, our young hero Peter Parker goes off to a warehouse to do some investigating. Turns out that there is a spider idol in this warehouse containing thousands of spiders. Once the idol is broken, one of these spiders bites Peter, prompting an incredibly real version of a spider god, who seemingly grants the abilities of a human spider on our hero. He is granted most of the same powers as regular Spider-Man, with a bit less strength and a stronger healing factor. He also gains the ability to use organic webbing, which can be gross, but in this time it's cool. Spider-Man Noir may not be the most powerful alternate spider. There are plenty of others who have added abilities, but he has the power of popularity on his side, not to mention a killer look and story that makes makes him a fan favorite character ever since his introduction. Number 5. Spider-Man 2099. Instead of getting bitten by a radioactive super spider, Miguel O'Hara's DNA was biologically mixed with a spider's DNA to save his life after he was forcibly hooked on a not far off future substance by his employer. If that sounds convoluted, well, yeah, it is, but it also sounds right at home in a comic book. Although the process of gaining his powers differed from Peter Parker, Miguel was still granted some of the same abilities at a pretty similar level. One thing that differs largely is Miguel's spider sense. He doesn't have one. Instead, Miguel has advanced super senses similar to someone like Daredevil. Miguel also has some abilities that are just wholly unique to him. For example, he possesses an incredible level of super speed, as well as telepathic communication abilities, both of which are really cool. He also has fangs and claws on his fingers and toes that he can use in combat, which is still cool, but a little bit freaky. On top of all those powers though, Miguel is from the year 2099, which obviously means that he naturally has a much more advanced set of technology at his disposal. But it's not just his powers and technology that make him better. The Spider-Man 2099 story is awesome, but you'll have to do the necessary reading to figure that out for yourself. Number 4. Mayday Parker. First appearing in a What If number 105 from December 1997, Mayday Parker is the daughter of Peter Parker and Mary Jane from a future alternate world. Coming from Earth 982, Mayday Parker becomes Spider-Girl and eventually Spider-Woman, filling in the role that her father once held. Where she is only slightly weaker than Peter in the strength department, she is much more agile, which I didn't even know was possible. Mayday also has a stronger, more precise spider sense, but on top of those advancements, her ability to stick to surfaces is considerably more powerful than Peter's and is actually pretty unique. Wall crawling does not come as naturally to May, and she has to concentrate to stick to surfaces, but she also has the ability to transmit her electrostatic stickiness through surfaces, making everyone and everything else stick to that surface, which is just nuts. What's even cooler is that she can reverse the ability, and instead of stick, she can repel. This adds power to her jumps, but can also be used to repel even people and objects away from her at speed. Mayday is awesome, and I can't wait to see what Marvel does with her going forward. Number 3. Ghost Spider. Spider-Gwen, or Ghost Spider, is Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's first love interest, but from the alternate reality of Earth 65. In this reality, Gwen Stacy is bitten by the spider, granting her powers and keeping Peter Parker as some nerd, but also her initial love interest. Gwen was granted superhuman strength, speed, toughened flesh, and pretty much all the spider-based powers that the regular Spider-Man would possess. Where she differs in a pretty big way is that after Gwen was depowered, she instead successfully bonded with the Venom symbiote. Gwen learned to find a very healthy balance with her symbiote. When she first bonded with Venom, thanks to a Matt Murdock version of Kingpin, she was rage-fueled and looking for revenge, but over time she realized that she needed to control that and give Venom better qualities to enhance in order to find balance with the symbiote. So in a way, Venom and Gwen became even greater heroes, helping each other out. Number 2. Miles Morales. Following the passing of Peter Parker in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, Miles Morales was bitten by an enhanced spider that caused him to pass out and foam at the mouth. When he awoke though, he discovered he had superpowers, and that's pretty cool. Taking on the role of the new Spider-Man, Miles is one of the only characters to fully inhabit the Spider-Man mantle with almost complete support from the fans. Miles Morales is an incredible character. He has his own villains and interpersonal connections to make him wholly his own, but having the Spider-Man name also pulls him into contact with many mainstays of the Spider-Man mythos. He has almost all of the regular Spider abilities, plus some amazing powers unique to himself, like his Venom, which is like a form of bioelectricity that he can emit from his body. Miles is also able to use a spider camouflage to make his whole body go invisible. Miles was so popular that his character got pulled over to the main Marvel universe after Secret Wars, making him one of the few surviving characters from the Ultimate Universe. And finally, in at number 1 today, it's Ultimate Spider-Man. Speaking of the Ultimate Universe, I think it's only fair to talk about that universe's Peter Parker. The Ultimate Spider-Man comic run is considered by a lot of people to be one of the absolute best Spider-Man runs ever. Being one of the best things to come from writer Brian Michael Bendis, Ultimate Spider-Man revamped the origin of the Spider-Man character for modern audiences in the 2000s, but also made Peter Parker even younger. The story follows the original story pretty closely, with only minor tweaks and changes that make it even better or more digestible for younger audiences, like the fixes made to the Clone Saga story or even the changes made to the Venom symbiote. The Earth 1610 comic book run had one writer at the helm, which really helped to maintain consistency consistency throughout the story, whereas Earth 616's Amazing Spider-Man carried on for 50 years and had many writers coming in to build the story, unfortunately giving it areas that lacked to some degree. Ultimate Spider-Man took a great idea and then ran with it, building up an incredible cast of characters and injecting a great deal of emotion and heart into the story as it took familiar ideas in bold new directions. That's why Ultimate Spider-Man is the #1 spot for Spider-Man alternates who can even attempt to be better than the original.
At number 10 we have Cyclops, aka Basilisk. This alternate Cyclops from the Age of X Alpha storyline is so intimidating that you might mistake him for a supervillain. With a backstory so dark, it'll leave you wondering how he didn't become one. It all began at the age of 14 when his powers activated without warning while he was in a movie theater, liquefying 7 people including his parents. Scott was incarcerated thereafter, eventually being transferred to Alcatraz after the Emergency Power Act rendered the prison a mutants-only facility, where he caught the attention of Arcade, who's got quite the name for a prison governor. It was thanks to Arcade that we get this epic mask, complete with ruby quartz lenses in the eye holes to inhibit Scotty's eye lasers, and a remote control mechanism that has the mask open down the middle, enabling the beams to pass through. In fact, Arcade had Scotty's eyelids surgically removed in order to prevent him from shutting off his eye beams by himself, so that he could use Scott against his will as an execution method for the other mutant inmates. And after several years of this, Scott managed to get a hold of the remote and blasted his way out of the prison, freeing the remaining mutants and vaporizing Arcade. And before you ask, no, the Basilisk does not turn people to stone with his gaze. He turns them to ash. Let's get into number 9. Doctor Strange Fate. Ah yes, the good old DC vs Marvel comics. The series that not only pit all of our favorite heroes against one another despite their conflicting franchises, but did so while introducing amalgamations of our favorite heroes and villains. One such hero was the amalgamation of Charles Xavier, Doctor Strange, and DC's Doctor Fate, but as it turns out, this convoluted mashup of a character is more than just a one-hit wonder. See, Strange Fate had discovered that restoring the Marvel and DC universes would result in the destruction of his own amalgam universe, and so he did everything that he could to try and prevent it, which, judging by the fact that you've probably never heard of this dude, was a task that he ultimately failed. However, while he couldn't prevent the destruction of his reality, he decided that he could at least save his own tail, and he did so by infusing his own psyche deep within that of Doctor Strange, where he was able to subtly manipulate the Sorcerer Supreme into creating several cross-dimensional incursions, but ultimately his existence was discovered by Batman and Access. And so, instead of just erasing the dude, Strange decides to preserve the entire amalgam universe within a pocket dimension, thus ensuring that Strange Fate would never be able to menace with the Marvel or DC universes again.
Number 8. Spooderman. Yes, I am including a poorly drawn version of Spider-Man on this list. Speaking with bad grammar, foul language, and mainly in dirty quotes that I am simply not allowed to utter on YouTube, Spooderman isn't for kids, but he's still a Spider-Man, dammit, and one with cultural impact. Spooderman was created on February 5th, 2011 on MS Paint, I'm pretty sure, and he traveled into the web of the internet, popping up here and there for years. Unfortunately, in the real world, the creator of Spooderman, YouTube channel Jordan Clory, passed away on February 14th, 2022, which was 11 days after Spooderman's 11th birthday. Spooderman is quite self-centered, often going on and on about how he has swag, but he isn't so self-centered as to not come to the aid of the Spider-Verse in the animated Spider-Verse movies. While not a central figure to the story by any means, he is seen briefly while going over the countless versions of Spider-Man throughout the multiverse. Number 7. Spider-Boy. In the world of the Amalgam universe, Peter Parker was the head of the team trying to create a clone of Super Soldier, who was a Superman Captain America amalgamation. The clone used the DNA of Peter, making it technically a clone of Peter Parker, and it had the power to warp gravity. Unfortunately, an explosion took Peter's life and awoke the clone before the time was right. In this universe, General Ross took the clone under his wing, adopting him and naming him Peter in honor of his creator. Peter, Ross, and the General made a pretty happy family until Uncle Jen was then robbed of life by a mugger. This then prompted the clone to go on as Spider-Boy, a cross of both Spider-Man, or even of Ben Reilly if you think about it, from Marvel, and Superboy from DC Comics. Spider-Boy was an instant favorite of the Amalgam universe, but unfortunately, DC and Marvel don't get along like they once did, so we probably won't see him for a very long time. Number 6. House of M Spider-Man. So this version of Peter Parker Peter, like a lot of other people in the House of M reality, actually had a better life, at least in the beginning. He stopped the robber who would have taken his Uncle Ben's life, so Uncle Ben is still alive, and the two created a version of Parker Industries. Since he stopped the robber, he also had a lucrative career as a wrestler, and then he became a very successful actor, even working with Mary Jane Watson, helping to make her a star actress. Gwen Stacy also never passed away, so Peter and her married and had a child together. The problems really come for this Spider-Man when the mutant-human war finally began. Peter, being so famous as a superhero, was immediately accused of being a mutant, but under the guidance of his Uncle Ben, Peter went along with it, pretending to be a mutant, becoming an idol for mutant children everywhere. A false idol though. It was only a matter of time before he was found out, and then he came under public fire for misrepresenting himself as a mutant for years. A movie he starred in about his life was pulled from theaters, stock in his business began to tank, his family members were forced to seclude themselves in their estate, and the conflict became so bad Peter had to fake his own passing and go into hiding. Number 5. Tom. I remember when I learned that the new Spider-Man who would be swinging into the MCU would be Tom Holland, and while at first I think I and a lot of people were skeptical of anyone who would step into the role of Marvel's #1 hero, Tom really killed it. Coming in for the first time in the MCU's Civil War, not only did we get the coolest intro to Peter himself with Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, but then the guy shows up at the airport battle and the first thing he does is steal Captain America's shield. And then he proceeds to make Falcon and the Winter Soldier look like complete chumps. But then we got a whole trilogy of films, each one knocking it out of the park, and almost followed a backwards approach to the films before it, giving us Peter living life in high school for 2 whole movies before he finally comes into his own at the end of the 3rd film, and now the character can go literally anywhere. I just want to know what's gonna happen next. In at number 4, Andrew. The second person to bring Spider-Man to the big screen, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man movies were a mixed bag. Some people were not as much of a fan of the Sony-backed films themselves, but almost no one I know had a complaint against Andrew himself or the way he played Spider-Man. Of the actors to play the wall crawler, I think this Spider-Man had some of the best quips, and he also looked freaking sweet. The chemistry between Peter and Gwen Stacy was also incredibly real feeling, which made it all the more emotionally devastating when Peter lost her. The villains of this version of Peter also had a much more genuine connection to the hero than the MCU version of the character. We got to see him create his own web shooters, unlike either of the other live action versions, showing us how smart he actually is, and this version of Peter was a much more believable and likable oddball. If you ask me, the first movie was better than the second, but man, I wish we got a 3rd movie. Number 3, Tobey. If we're gonna talk about Tom and Andrew, we need to talk about the first one to bring it all to the screen, Tobey Maguire. This version of Spider-Man, and honestly his supporting cast, all give a life to the character and characters of the Spider-Man mythos that we had never seen before. Peter in this universe is much more dorky. Like, you really believe that this guy is a big old nerd turned superhero, but it also makes him incredibly likable when coupled with how much of a genuine hero he actually is. Not only that, but his connection with Uncle Ben and Aunt May was probably the most real of any live action adaptation, which made it so much more real when Peter lost his uncle. The other thing with the original trilogy of Spider-Man movies is that Peter struggled. His character was constantly trying to make money or keep his relationships afloat, he was struggling to pay rent, and he was taking care of Aunt May, all while trying to balance being a web-swinging superhero who was constantly losing his powers and dealing with his idols always becoming some of the best supervillains to come to movies. Well, at least in the first 2 movies. Also, we got Bully Maguire, and that's really cool. So, number 2, Pavitr Prabhakar. Pavitr Prabhakar first came to us in Spider-Man India #1 back in January of 2005, and man, is he awesome. As a young poor kid, Pavitr went to live with his Uncle Bim and Aunt Maya in Mumbai. Pavitr was bullied on the regs, and while being chased by other kids one day, he came into contact with an ancient yogi who ended up giving him the power of a spider to fight against evil. While figuring out his powers, Pavitr refused to help a woman being attacked by several men, and this led to the passing of his Uncle Bim at the hands of those men, since Bim tried to help her when Spider-Man wouldn't. And just like that, that, as with all Spider-Men, Peter learned that with great power comes great responsibility. His powers, weaknesses, and pretty much everything else are very similar to Earth 616 Spider-Man, but usually with a bit of a mystical twist given the way in which he received his powers. He has faced villains like Nalan Oberoi, a crime lord who used an amulet to get demonic powers, and Dr. Octopus, who had demon arms that were given to him by Nalan. In the Spider-Verse, he battled alongside Superior Spider-Man, Spider-Man UK, and all his other alternates as one of the best of the bunch. Finally, in at number 1, Ben Reilly. Technically, just like Superior Spider-Man, this alternate Spider-Man isn't an alternate Spider-Man at all. Ben Reilly is a Peter Parker clone from the 616 continuity, but don't think that makes him any less awesome. Ben has all the same powers as Spider-Man with a much darker story. As Scarlet Spider, Ben was a favorite among fans, even outshining Spider-Man himself on a few occasions, but he has gone through so many twists and turns throughout his time. So after being created by a villain known as the Jackal, Ben would be defeated, but in secret he would go into hiding for 5 years, returning to New York as the Scarlet Spider. Ben even stepped into the role of Spider-Man himself during a brief period of time, and at the end of that arc, Ben would lose his life, only to be resurrected and then taken to the afterlife over and over and over again by his creator. This drove him completely insane, driving him to overthrow his creator and become the new Jackal. He eventually went back to being the Scarlet Spider, became Spider-Man again, and now he is the totally awesome Chasm. Kicking off the list at number 10 is Spider-Man Punisher. Yes, I am sort of cheating for this one. On Earth 71928, location of the What If Peter Parker Became the Punisher story, Peter Parker, well, becomes the Punisher. It's in the title. On the night Uncle Ben's life was drawn to a close, instead of following the classic story, Peter caught and dispatched the killer using the same weapon that took his uncle's life. From that moment, Peter tried to avoid going full murderous Punisher at first, but having taken the first step and knowing how much more permanent of a solution it is to just take them out, he went full force into that lifestyle. He carried the iron that took Uncle Ben's life, as well as a large assortment of other weaponry, including his web shooters with multiple different types of ammunition that allowed him to take down the Sinister Six with ease, and he was even able to save Gwen Stacy. So technically, this Punisher was not only better than Punisher, but also a more effective crime fighter than Spider-Man himself, in a way. Number 9, Punisher 2099. In the far-flung future of the year 2099, Frank Castle was long gone. So, Jake Gallows took up the fight. Jake was an officer of the Public Eye Police Force. In an attack ordered by Kron Stone, the Venom of 2099, Jake lost his mother, brother, and sister-in-law, while also being gravely injured himself. Being inspired by the war journals of Frank Castle, after his recovery, Jake became the new Punisher, taking up the crusade on crime after getting his revenge on Venom. Jake specifically sought out justice for the poor, using his 2099 technology alongside modern and futuristic weaponry to operate as a vigilante before serving as Victor Von Doom's Minister of Punishment. You'll see him most recently in the recent Savage Avengers comics, but no spoilers, so sorry.
At number 8, we have Jean Grey the Conqueror. We all know Marvel just loves to introduce super cool takes on our favorite characters and then proceed to do absolutely nothing with them. I'm looking at you, Galactus Buster Armor, and no missed opportunity makes me as sad as this entry does, cause in the all-new X-Men number 25, we're briefly told about numerous dark realities which don't end very well for our X-Men, including an alternate reality in which Jean Grey was consumed by her inner darkness and went on to conquer the planet by force. You see, a couple realities next door, and Jean Grey ain't the telepathic sweetheart we all know and love, on account of the fact that her early formative years were not spent with Charles Xavier, who was to teach her how to control her powers and to help her mold her persona, thus putting her in touch with her humanity. Instead, the Jean of this Earth listened to Magneto, who taught her how it was a mutant's birthright to conquer, leading her to decide that the reason she was born with her powers was just that. And I don't know about you, but I definitely need the whole story which takes place in this reality. Marvel, if you're listening, get on it. At number 7, we have Professor Drake. Old Man Winter over here proves single-handedly that there is still hope for those of us who can't grow a beard. But who is the Ice Master, you ask? Well, simply put, he's the elderly future version of our favorite Iceman, with a new fitting superhero name to match his wizard-like appearance. See, fashion doesn't get much better in the future, so Ice Master makes do with his cloak. But the most notable difference, besides the beard of course, is how the Ice Master is able to more effectively channel his ice powers thanks to that ice spear of his. Man, if I had to $1 for every time I said ice. Ice Master only really comes around when his presence is needed in the past, like that time he came from the future to the present to tell his younger self to give up fighting as it only leads to a dark future. Iceman ain't too convinced and the two even duke it out against one another. But they don't stay at each other's throats for long. In fact, during the second issue of Battle of the Atom, we get to see Iceman across 3 different eras fighting alongside each other. But regardless of which era we're talking about, I'm sure a lot of us can agree that Ice Master is the coolest. Ice cool, that is. At number 6, Planet X Rogue. The version of Rogue we get in Uncanny Avengers is probably the most powerful Rogue we've ever seen, and yes, that includes the countless versions of her imbued with the Phoenix Force. After taking a fatal blow that led me to believe that she expired for like half a dozen issues, she played a crucial role in thwarting off a celestial attack by absorbing the powers of every X-Men and Avenger available. We're talking hundreds of superheroes here, imbuing her with what's basically every superpower at once. And these powers ain't from lackluster players either. We've got some big names here like the Hulk and Wonder Man, just to name a couple. She becomes so insanely powerful that she's able to single-handedly slow Exitar's descent to Earth by pushing up against the bottom of his foot, and when Death Sentry held the other foot, Exitar was halted completely. Like, come on, you don't think that's epic? Sure, she couldn't stop him on her own, but come on, this dude is big enough to size up our entire planet, for crying out loud. His shoe size is bigger than Rhode Island. Need I go on? At number 5 is Bloodstorm. This version of Storm from an alternate reality is very similar to her canonical 616 counterpart, save for the fact that she was captured by Count Dracula in an attempt to turn her into his bride. And after becoming the vampiric Bloodstorm, she easily overthrew the Count and helped the X-Men defeat him. However, she ultimately decided not to return to the X-Men on account of her vampirism. She was later imprisoned by some of Dracula's disciples, and while attempting to escape, Monroe was confronted by one of her former teammates, Kitty Pryde, who attacked Bloodstorm as she'd rather see her friend perish than be a vampire. But Kitty hesitated at the last second, falling prey to Bloodstorm as her first victim. There's also a Bloodstorm from an alternate reality in which she was captured by Dracula first before joining the X-Men, where her bloodlust sadly overpowered her, resulting in her taking a big ol' bite of at least both Beast and Professor X. This reality's weather-controlling vampire proves without a doubt that sometimes the best way to improve a character is by adding fangs. At number 4 is Belasco, and no, I'm not talking about the supervillain. I'm talking about the X-Man who became the supervillain in an alternate timeline, that X-Man being Nightcrawler. And if that sounds a bit convoluted, you ain't heard of nothing yet. You see, the events of this timeline closely resemble that of Earth 616. That is until Nightcrawler loses his arm in battle and is forced to teleport to safety. Unfortunately for him, thanks to some Terrigen mist, some weird opposite day stuff is going on as he finds that everyone in the town he's transported himself to are mutants, whereas conversely the Nightcrawler seemed to be stripped of all his mutant powers and appearance, making him stand out as a regular dude among thousands of mutants. Yeah, for once it would have actually paid for Kurt to be blue. Kurt was attacked and slain by the people of the village for being different, because even though everything's different, nothing's really changed. Now, moments away from his own demise, Kurt was approached by the demonic Mephisto, who empowered that bitter voice deep down in Kurt's heart, which always tempted him to believe that those hateful and fearful beings he was sworn to protect were not worth the effort. Now imbued with a deep thirst for revenge against the world for treating him like the monster he appeared to be, Kurt was transformed into a demonic entity imbued with demonic powers and false memories that would perpetuate his unrelenting hatred, and manifesting the spitting image of Belasco, the X-Men's former nemesis. In fact, it was revealed that the Nightcrawler had actually been this reality's Belasco all along, thanks in part to a time loop set in motion by Captain America, who refused to deal with Mephisto and some time travel shenanigans. It's even hinted that Belasco's frequent targeting of the X-Men over the years is actually a subconscious cry for help. So this version of Nightcrawler makes her the perfect evil counterpart, as this pure-hearted X-Men had been compensating for his monstrous appearance with genuine kindness and optimism, doing his best to protect the world that hated him. Yet thanks to Mephisto, Kurt was forced into becoming the very thing he feared the most. At number 3 is Death. What do you get when you merge Wolverine with the Horsemen of the Apocalypse? You get the Eternal Rest itself. During an Avengers event which saw Kang damage the time stream, something he's prone to do at this point, the Avengers were faced with Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen, all of whom bearing uncannily resemblances to our favorite superheroes. We've got a demonic looking 8-armed 4-legged Spider-Man as our first horseman, Red Hulk as the Horseman of War, Scarlet Witch with the Black Horse, and finally Wolverine, the Horseman of Eternal Rest. And as for what makes this Wolverine special, aside from the fact that he's permanently fused with a floating horse, is the fact that Wolverine now embodies the very entropy of the universe itself. Well, that is, if he didn't already. At number 2 is The Witness. This alternate reality version of Gambit is himself a temporal anomaly existing at the junction where all timelines converge, thus allowing the Witness to exist at all points in time at once, enabling to perceive everything before it happens, and making for one of the coolest X-Men in the multiverse. Now, being the anomaly that he is, much of his origin is shrouded in mystery. In fact, when Bishop was tasked with gathering as much info on the dude as he could, the only clue we got was him saying, "I am LeBeau." And more than LeBeau, which is about as cryptic as you can get. Now, upon deeper investigation, I discovered that while many assumed the Witness to be an elderly Rami LeBeau, otherwise known as Gambit, it was revealed in the X-Men Future History Messiah War sourcebook, holy cow, what a mouthful, that the Witness was actually a different person altogether, a conclusion that I personally reject. I mean, come on, you're telling me that the Witness, the last guy to ever see the X-Men alive, whose name is LeBeau, isn't actually Gambit? Like, they both even shared the same Cajun accent, for crying out loud. Now, this could be explained by a flashback where we see a 6-year-old Remy running into the Witness by chance, who became somewhat of Remy's mentor. But that doesn't really eliminate the possibility of these two being one and the same, since the Witness is a time traveler after all. There's also that time in Gambit issue number 10 when Gambit is on their hunt for a special jewel with temporal properties, an artifact which is revealed to be sent to Gambit backwards through time by the Witness himself. Bishop at one point even refers to the Witness as Gambit to his face, a name that the Witness does not deny owning, instead simply replying by calling Bishop Mon Ami. And if you're still not happy with my anti-canonical reasoning, too bad. At number 1, we have the Rex Dogs. If you've got a problem, let me remind you that this list calls for better X-Men, and if you believe that the universe where anthropomorphic canines exist in the place of humans is somehow inferior to the X-Men, then you must be a cat person. You see, the Rex Dogs are leagues better than their human counterparts on numerous fronts. Firstly, the original X-Men are prone to fight amongst themselves, like how Wolverine and Cyclops stick together about as well as two repelling magnets, whereas the Rex Dogs take loyalty to a whole new level. In terms of combat, the X-Men are strictly known for their heroic accomplishments, while on the other hand, not only are the Rex Dogs unafraid of getting their paws dirty, they're also adorable while doing it. Guys, let's face it, it's hard not to love these mutant doggies. The only thing that the X-Men have on the Rex Dogs is opposable thumbs, which are definitely overrated. I mean, come on, Professor Rex is a disabled telepathic chihuahua, for crying out loud. From vampires to puppies, these mutants prove that sometimes the best way to improve a character is with a few unexpected twists. Of course, we still have the classic X-Men, flaws and all, but it's always fun to imagine what could have been with these alternate reality versions.
And at 10, T'Challa. In the year 1988, within the hidden nation of Wakanda, T'Chaka, the ruler, cautions his young son T'Challa against venturing beyond their borders, emphasizing the suffering and devastation that exists in the outside world. However, driven by curiosity, T'Challa defies his father's advice one night and ventures to the outskirts of Wakanda. Unbeknownst to him though, the powerful force field that conceals the nation attracts the attention of Yondu Onoda's subordinates, who mistakenly abduct T'Challa due to the cosmic energy emanating from Wakanda's vibranium meteorite. In space, Yondu then reprimands his crew for snatching the wrong person, but decides to welcome T'Challa nonetheless, recognizing his adventurous spirit. Impressed by T'Challa's exploratory nature, Yondu extends an invitation to join the Ravagers and explore the vast expanse of the galaxy. Fast forward 20 years, where T'Challa, now known as Star-Lord, successfully retrieves the orb from its chamber. However, his actions draw the attention of Korra the Pursuer and two Sakarans who are sent by Roman the Accuser to get the artifact. This is just it's from an episode of What If, you know, the MCU animated series on Disney Plus. So if you want the full story along with Thanos and the rest, be sure you watch that episode because it's good, pretty good. And at 9, Guardians 3000. As the ruler of the dwindling Spartax Empire, Star-Lord of Earth 691 found himself leading the remnants of his war fleet. In a critical turn of events, he was summoned by the Guardians of the Galaxy along with the remaining leaders of the Galactic Council to address a grave situation. This involved the human Gina Drake and a temporal anomaly that reset their family, returning them to the beginning of a war they had previously won. Amidst an unexpected ambush orchestrated by the Brotherhood of the Badoon, Star-Lord courageously fought alongside his fellow Guardians, determined to create an opening for their escape. United by their mission, they braved the chaos and danger together, striving to overcome the odds and protecting their cause. He has a pistol capable of conjuring one of the 4 elements, and Peter Quill of this Earth has also mentioned that he inherited his armor, element, gun, and ship when he became Star-Lord. So it could mean that this is isn't really an alternate version of Star-Lord, but rather his descendant. Gina Drake also suggests it as they meet Earth 616 Star-Lord, and it's revealed in Guardians 3000 number 6 that Peter was born on Spartax in 2985. And at 8, Red Rain. Batman investigates a series of gruesome murders in Gotham City, only to discover that the killer is none other than Dracula, the legendary vampire. Batman teams up with a rogue vampire named Tanya to stop Dracula and his brood from terrorizing the city, but in the course of it, Batman actually makes Tanya turn him. Yeah, he becomes a vampire to fight the vampires. Tanya then provides Batman with a blood substitute to spare him from the cycle of death and murder that comes with being bitten by a vampire, but in order to destroy Dracula's minions, Batman lures them into the Batcave, where Tanya and her followers engage them in combat. Batman detonates multiple explosives, destroying Wayne Manor and exposing the cave to sunlight, which ultimately kills all the vampires inside it. Batman then confronts Dracula himself and impales the Vampire Lord on a tree that had been struck by lightning. This act, however, comes at the cost of Batman's humanity, as Dracula drained the last of his blood. Nevertheless, Batman assured Alfred that he has nothing to fear, as the Batman, with his new, literally vampiric powers, will live on forever. The most Batman version on this list, if I'm honest. And at 7, Gotham by Gaslight. Gotham by Gaslight is about 19th century Bruce Wayne recalling the killing of his parents as a child. Consulting with Dr. Sigmund Freud, yes that one, about the dreams he's had about the deaths of his parents and significantly bats, he then returns to Gotham City to become Batman and fight crime. The Gotham press begins to circulate the news of the Batman and soon links his appearance to a series of women found killed throughout the city. The identity of the killer is announced by Commissioner Tolliver to be Jack the Ripper. Eventually, Bruce is accused of the murders and sentenced to be and is imprisoned at Arkham Asylum. But with the help of Alfred, he escapes, dons the Batsuit, and stops Jack the Ripper, who is revealed to be Jacob Packer. Jacob then also confesses to causing the deaths of Thomas and Martha and framing Bruce in revenge for Martha's rejection. The comic was a one-shot from January of 1990, but became a fan favorite and is quite the interesting and dark tale, because Batman fighting Jack the Ripper, that's kinda dope. And at 6, Dark Claw. Logan Wayne is a combination of obviously Bruce Wayne and Logan, being first introduced in Marvel vs. DC number 3. At 5 years old, after witnessing his parents' killing at the hands of an armed robber, Logan Wayne was sent to live with his uncle in Alberta, Canada. His uncle was a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and was ambushed and murdered by poachers a short time after his arrival in Canada. After the death of his uncle, Logan then went to live in a home run by nuns, and as soon as he was old enough, he enlisted in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Logan was submitted to the Weapon X project, the Canadian Super Soldier program, and it was here where Logan had adamantium bonded to his bones and learned of his metamutant nature. The Weapon X project was terminated due to its dual failure. Logan was ineffective as a weapon because he possessed a conscience, but this didn't stop him from being pretty damn badass. Having all the powers of Logan, as well as things like the Clawcopter and Clawmobile, I'm not even kidding, those are actually things, this is essentially a superpowered Batman, and I think that that's something we all wanted. Plus, Dark Claw, that's a great freaking name, dude. That's dope. That's terrifying. Halfway through, in at number 5, Red Sun. Imagine, if you will, Batman being a force for Mother Russia. The Batman of this story was born to a pair of dissidents who were later killed by Stalin's police force. He vowed to seek vengeance against Pyotr Roslov, the captain of the police force. After 20 years, he became the most wanted man in the Soviet Union and continuously challenged the authorities, executing acts of terror against Superman's regime and evading Roslov's police force skillfully. I couldn't help it. Just that name kind of makes you have to go into that accent. The people revered him as a legend, impossible to kill and the ghost of killed dissidents. Roslov convinced Batman to team up with him and eliminate Superman, arguing that with Superman out of the way, Batman's vendetta against Roslov would be easier. Batman agreed and kidnapped Wonder Woman, using her lasso to draw Superman into a wasteland where he bombarded him with simulated red sunlight, and Batman intended to lock Superman away in a cellar, but Wonder Woman destroyed her lasso and the generator powering the lamps, which freed Superman. Batman then offed himself by detonating a bomb that was inside of his body to avoid being lobotomized and locked up, because of course that's gonna happen. In at 4, Batman the Merciless. When Ares, the Greek god of war, created a helmet that amplified his powers 100-fold, war broke out in an effort to stop him. For 2 years, Batman Batman and Wonder Woman fought side by side to get close enough to attempt to stop the god. It was during this war that Bruce and Diana fell in love with each other. They and their allies made a pledge to kill the God of War in order to end his reign of terror once and for all, and as they finally mounted an attack to kill Ares, the two were able to get the helmet off the God of War. However, Diana was incapacitated, causing Batman to believe that she had died. Driven by grief, Bruce put on the helmet of the God of War to defeat Ares, despite being warned of its corrupting influence by Diana earlier on. Believing he could wield it mercifully while making war fair and just, he succeeded in killing Ares but was turned into a merciless warrior himself who started to see his old code as worthless. Despite learning that Diana had actually survived and was only stunned by Ares, Bruce was too addicted to the power of the helmet to let it go. He in fact chose to kill the woman he loved rather than risk losing the helmet. And then with virtually unlimited power and no sense of morality, Bruce went on to wage war on the entire world. Because, you know, gotta love angry Batman. This is basically just Injustice, Superman, but Batman. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Red Death. Red Death is a villainous amalgamation of Batman and the Flash. Possessing super speed and a bloodlust like no other, his origin on Earth -52 is a dark one. Batman started off fighting crime with Robin, obviously, but Robins kept dying. Robin after Robin, none would survive. So Batman grew increasingly extreme within his methods and basically lost all sense of morality. This led him to then seek out Barry, the Flash, for his Speed Force powers. However, when Barry refused to comply, Batman used weapons from his various enemies to incapacitate Barry. Batman then rigged up a cosmic treadmill to his Batmobile somehow. I don't know how a treadmill is gonna help power a car, but then he attached Barry to the hood and drove them both into the Speed Force, causing a fusion of the two. The resulting entity was an evil Batman with super speed and a lust for death, while Barry's consciousness was trapped inside of Bruce's body. Oh boy. Red Death was later approached by the Batman Who Laughs and convinced to join Barbados' Dark Knights, whose aim was to conquer the multiverse, because of course it is. The logistics of how this came to be are unclear, but it's still freaking terrifying. I don't know how a treadmill makes the Batmobile able to get into the Speed Force, but you know what? 88 miles an hour, Marty. Let's go. Penultimately, in at number 2, Batman Beyond. Amanda Waller, director of Project Cadmus, needed a new Batman to continue to fight for justice, and saw genetic engineering as the solution. She created Project Batman Beyond by using Bruce Wayne's DNA to rewrite a male human's reproductive material, and found a couple in Gotham City with a psychological profile nearly identical to that of Bruce's parents, the McGinnises. Warren McGinnis was secretly injected with a nanotech solution that rewrote his DNA to basically be Bruce's, and then a year later, Terry was born with half of his mother's genetic material and half of Bruce's. To complete Terry's origins to become a crime fighter, Amanda planned to have the same trauma that inspired Bruce to become Batman happen to Terry's parents. Yes, this woman plotted to have a kid's parents assassinated right in front of him. After a night at the theater watching The Grey Ghost Strikes, Amanda had the Phantasm go over to kill Terry's parents. However, Phantasm refused to go along with the plan and allowed the McGinnises to continue on, unaware of what might have happened that night. Terry still became the new Batman, fighting for justice in a futuristic Gotham City, but still, come on, Amanda. I mean, like, I know you're Amanda Waller, but like, still, come on, okay? But also, Batman Beyond is like iconic and everyone loves it. And finally, in at number 1, The Batman Who Laughs. The story of Batman of Earth -22 was not much different from that of any other version of the Caped Crusader. When he was a boy, Bruce watched his parents get killed in an alleyway, vowing vengeance against crime. He trained for years and years to become a hero and then became Batman, fighting supervillains in Gotham. But everything went sideways for this Batman when the Joker started a killing spree across Gotham. The clown had discovered that he was dying from the same chemicals that had actually turned him into what he was and wanted to take everyone with him. He killed all of Batman's enemies, including Penguin, Catwoman, Killer Croc, and the Ventriloquist, and the Joker also killed Commissioner Gordon, who accidentally sprung an acid trap on his notebook and melted his face off. After bombing a hospital and recreating the scene from Bruce's parents' death right in front of him multiple times, this Batman lost control and broke Joker's neck. Unbeknownst to Batman though, the Joker exhaled a toxin that contaminated Bruce's heart, which infected anyone close to him if he had died. In this case, it was Batman. So this caused him to snap and basically become the new Joker before taking over Earth -22 and later on gaining cosmic power. So yeah, I'm gonna put that at number 1. That's terrifying but also dope.
Coming in at number 10 is Superior Spider-Man. This version of Spider-Man is technically not an alternate. He comes from the 616 Earth and fits into the regular Spider-Man continuity, but so many of you guys suggested this Spider-Man, and how am I going to say no to you guys? For those of you who don't know, the Superior Spider-Man is actually Dr. Otto Octavius, but you may have noticed he's decidedly less out of shape, and that's because Otto was able to finally defeat Spider-Man by transferring his consciousness out of his own dying body and placing it into the healthy, superpowered body of Peter Parker. With Peter's consciousness seemingly passing away inside of Otto's body, it's like Freaky Friday, only much more serious and with Spider-Man. You might think that a villain inhabiting the body of Spider-Man would be a bad thing, and in some ways, you are right. Otto was extremely ruthless when using the powers of Spider-Man, but the thing is, he was still operating as a heroic Spider-Man. Inside the body of Spider-Man and sharing all of Peter's memories, Doc Ock had a bit of a change of heart and decided to use his vast intelligence and unrelenting nature, dedicating himself to being a better hero, a superior Spider-Man. Number 9, Spider-Punk. First appearing in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3, number 10 from November 2014, Hobart Hobby Brown became Spider-Man when he got bit by a radioactive spider from illegal waste dumping and decided to use his powers to go against the authority. Hell yeah. The President of the United States in this reality is Norman Osborn, who is also still the CEO of Oscorp. Funnily enough, Oscorp in this reality also created Venom, aka VENOM, aka Variable Engagement Neurosensitive Organic Mesh. So, Venom here is created in a lab, like a bioweapon, one that President Osborn gives to his lackeys and dons on himself. So it's an army of Venom-powered soldiers led by a Venom-powered President Norman Osborn. But Spider-Punk also has many of his own followers behind him. Fighting for their beliefs, the Spider Army is a group of punks ready to stand their ground with Spider-Man as their punk rock leader. Unfortunately for Osborn, their Venom is just as weak to sound as the Venom we all know and love. And we are shown this when Spider-Punk plays his electric guitar at full volume, completely blasting away the symbiotes as the two groups clash. He bashed his guitar on Norman's head, defeating him and liberating everyone. And it was awesome. Super cool. But moving on to number 8, Exiles. Tony Stark, the undisputed monarch of Earth. What? Yes. You take a man with the intelligence, wealth, and power of Anthony Stark and make him unbothered by any kind of sense of morality, and that's a man who can bring the world to its knees. But he also has the sense to not let them know it, and then be begged to take charge. Tony Stark of Earth 42777 acquired every world conglomerate, he organized a mutant war against humanity, and then defeated their leader, Magneto. He created a worldwide famine, the likes of which was never seen before, and then he invented the cures and vaccines to fix it. He then got elected president. He developed weather controlling technologies to create biblical level natural disasters in Europe and Asia, having them beg for help to the point of giving up their own control. Central America and Canada had economic down spirals that brought them into the fold as well, and he made a deal with Dr. Doom, who had attacked the Capitol and taken out all the other democratic leaders in America. And then he destroyed Doom after receiving a blast to the face that left him disfigured, just like Emperor Palpatine. He's D-Life the Hulk. This version of Tony Stark is ruthless and powerful, and that is why he's on this list. Number 7, Ultimate Universe Iron Man. Having your mind and body altered by an infinity gem sounds like it could go anywhere, but fittingly for Tony Stark, it led to him being able to physically and mentally interact with pretty much any computer ever. And that's a pretty good ability for someone who flies around in a technological suit of armor. The Antonio Stark of Earth 1610, or the Ultimate Universe, has basically become part man, part machine. Kinda like Cyborg, but not really. Being able to project his mind into computers and androids, allowing him to be nigh unkillable, proven when the Master, aka Reed Richards, of this universe seemingly brought his demise, but he became a non-physical entity which could manifest itself via computer systems. When actually physically inhabiting inhabiting an Iron Man armor, he gains the usual abilities, plus force fields and cloaking. But he's also got nanites in his bloodstream that he uses to control his suits, as well as open locks, defuse little boom booms, and interact with all forms of technology before he gets infused with an Infinity Gem and becomes super cool. Number 6. Iron Hammer. The Iron Man from the 2018 comic book event Infinity Warps blended the characters of Iron Man and Thor to make for one of the most powerful versions of Tony Stark ever. For some backstory, this warp world was created when Gamora gained the power of the Infinity Stones, and she used them to fold the universe in half, merging souls together, creating amalgamated heroes like Stark Odinson. This awesome version of Iron Man and Thor enjoys virtual immortality thanks to his Asgardian physiology, along with superhuman strength and endurance. His hammer, Mjolnir Iron, I know, stupid name, just go with it, has all the same powers as the regular Mjolnir, but it also grants Stark his armor, which is now a mystical suit of Asgardian armor that does all the same cool things. Since both Thor and Tony kind of had daddy issues, this version of the mix also has their father, Howard Odin, playing a big part in the story too. It's just really awesome. Okay. Number 5. Iron Maniac. Coming at us from the alternate Earth of 5012, the Iron Maniac shows readers what a totally evil version of Tony Stark would look like, other than the Exiles version. That one's also really evil. This Tony Stark from this war-torn version of the Marvel Universe has done some truly horrible things following the loss of so many of his fellow heroes at the hands of a villain named Titanus. Using a really cool armor that also somewhat resembles Doctor Doom's armor, the Iron Maniac went against the Fantastic Four and even took the life of Johnny Blaze in his native universe. His advanced armor repels some magical attacks as well as generates a neural dampening field that mitigates telepathic and telekinetic attacks to some degree, which really helped him out to be absolutely terrible. Reed Richards of Earth 5012 eventually found a way to send this Tony Stark to the 616 universe, where he faced the 616 Fantastic Four and eventually the New Avengers, showing just how powerful this evil Iron Man actually is, and making us thank our stars that normal Tony Stark is a good guy. Number 4. Iron Lantern. The Amalgam Universe combined the world's two biggest comic book companies, DC and Marvel Comics, during a time of utmost peace and prosperity. Just kidding, this was in the 90s. This crazy event pitted popular characters from both sides against each other and even fused some characters together. One incredibly cool amalgamation would be between Iron Man and Green Lantern. Harold Stark, HAL for short, was the founder of Stark Aircraft, and while test flying a prototype aircraft, it suddenly took off on its own to a crashed alien spaceship, and it crashed itself yards away. The crash left shards of metal in Stark's chest, which after meeting the dying alien, Roman Sur, Stark survived using an alien battery that suspiciously was in the shape of a lantern to build a suit of armor. This armor not only kept him alive though, it gave him the ability to create green solid energy constructs, fire plasma bolts, fly at speeds beyond the speed of light, time travel, and it granted him almost unlimited telepathic powers. He also had translation of virtually any language, force field generation, and the ever classic superhuman strength and durability. Yeah, he'll put his hand on your chest, like this. He'll go, stop. And then he'll fire a little repulsor beam out. Number 3. Iron Man and Doctor Strange. So it turns out that Tony Stark is a good fit to become the Sorcerer Supreme, and honestly, when you think about the intelligence of the guy, it makes a decent amount of sense. In What If issue number 113 from 1998, Tony Stark and Stephen Strange meet at a party, and after leaving together, Tony is the one driving when they get into the car crash that would normally ruin Strange's hands. Where in the normal continuity, Stephen has to deal with his hands relatively alone, in this What If, it leads Tony on a journey fueled by guilt to try and repair Strange's hands. Eventually, it leads him to the Ancient One, which in turn leads to him becoming the master of the mystic arts, learning how to infuse his tech and armor with magic to create a much more capable hero. As for Stephen though, he becomes almost like Baron Mordo and betrays Stark to Dormammu. Luckily, this is in the list of better Stephen Strange alternates. Number 2. All New X-Men Annual number 1. But just to hammer home the idea idea that Stark would make a great Sorcerer Supreme, we actually have more than one alternate reality where this takes place. The second one I want to talk about today would be an all-new X-Men Annual number 1 from 2014. This story showed us Iron Man from the temporary reality number of 591. Tony in this reality brought together the Avengers to permanently end the threat of Thanos on the universe, which resulted in the alien races of said universe rewarding the Earth and its heroes with advanced alien technology, turning the Earth into a utopia. Tony himself would start to lean more into his mystical side with all the extra time he had after saving the universe, eventually becoming the Sorcerer Supreme and being able to solve further conflicts without needing any kind of real fighting. Now, last I've seen, this Tony was living youthfully comfortable at 126 years old. There are even more versions of Sorcerer Tonys out in the multiverse, but you can go find them yourself, because I'm done. After this number 1 point, Robert Downey Jr. Look, we can talk about magical Iron Mans all day, but nothing can really stand up to the closest thing we got to a real Iron Man. Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of Tony Stark was the whole groundwork for the MCU, and his character endured for years. Taking aspects of the original character and adding some realism and a really likable performance made for a version of Iron Man that boosted up not only the comic book character's popularity, but through the MCU, it boosted up the popularity of comic books in general, and for us here at Top 10 Nerd, that is quite a statement. Being in a world that is a bit more grounded and relatable to our own, this Iron Man doesn't have as complex of a story, nor is he more powerful as his comic book counterpart, but he is more than impressive enough without that. Not to mention, he was the one to actually defeat Thanos in the end. His send-off from the MCU affected people who don't even read comic books, and I think that says a lot. Kicking off our list at number 10, Spider. We are kicking off the list talking about a Peter Parker variant that's bonded with the Carnage symbiote coming from Earth 15 known as the Spider. This Peter coming from Earth 15 is a much more sadistic version of the web swinger. He's also a ginger, so that tells you all you need to know. The Spider claims that he has been sentenced to a total of 67 life sentences in prison for the crimes that he has committed, but of course, to make him just a bit more lovable, he has a great sense of humor, very much like that of Deadpool. It's great if you can look past a lot of the extra creepy factors of his character. The Spider was introduced in Exiles number 12 and was a big part of the reality-saving team featured in it, being a sometimes leader of said team. He was a very interesting take on what most people are used to from Spider-Man, having only like his humor and his leadership to make him genuinely likable. As a Carnage-bonded sociopath, he was pretty powerful, but he nonetheless was sent a one-way ticket to the afterlife with a blast from Firestar in Exiles number 44. Number 9, The Amazing Spider. This version of Spider-Man, similar to the Spider, is also evil, but instead of this being caused by a symbiote, on Earth 11638, it's actually the inclusion of Uncle Ben that makes this character go bad. In this world, Uncle Ben never loses his life, and instead, he helps train Peter Parker with his new spider powers, and eventually even helps him to form Parker Industries. Peter and Uncle Ben end up building a machine that allows Peter to lure other alternate versions of Spider-Man to this reality, where he promptly absorbs their powers to increase his own. It's incredibly evil, but it makes him the most powerful hero on that Earth and eliminates the need for any other hero to even exist. His whole plan came unraveled when he tried to do this to the Spider-Man from Earth 616 though. When faced with our main Spider-Man, the powerful version of Peter loses his life and his soul is sent to hell, where he becomes fused with the spirit of vengeance, becoming the Ghost Rider Spider. And it's incredibly cool. Number 8, Punisher Noir. The 2009 Noir series from Marvel Comics saw several heroes existing in the Prohibition era post-World War I. Kicking off with the hit of Spider-Man Noir, other characters like Iron Man, Daredevil, the X-Men, and of course, the Punisher soon followed. In this timeline, Frank Castiglione Sr. was a hero of World War I, who had a huge skull tattoo on his chest as a means of intimidating his German opponents in the trenches. And he was also like an American James Bond style hero going on missions against the Russians and Germans. Unfortunately though, when he returns from the war, he finds himself dispatched from life because of his previous government missions. I bet you thought he would be the Punisher here, huh? Well, you're wrong, because after finding his father's arsenal, Frank Jr. wears a skull emblazoned balaclava and hunts down his father's executioners, who turn out to be noir versions of Jigsaw, Bullseye, and Barracuda, before a final run-in with a fan favorite, the Russian. While some of the noir characters missed the mark in my eyes, Punisher Noir is actually pretty great. Number 7, 5 Ronin. While we're on the topic of historical versions of Frank Castle, I have to mention one of my favorite little stories. 5 Ronin from 2011 moves the Marvel Universe back in time to ancient feudal Japan, with 5 issues each focusing on samurai versions of the Punisher, the Hulk, Deadpool, Psylocke, and Wolverine. It is so cool. Each character gets a short standalone story where all of them eventually encounter the wandering Deadpool, who narratively links them all together for us. This version of the Punisher shows him returning to Japan from war in Korea to find a rival has taken the opportunity to take away his family and claim his land. As is usually the case with Frank Castle, or in this world, Akagi, this leads to some ruthless revenge. Wielding a katana and a big old blunderbuss that I forget the name of, Samurai Frank brings a decided end to anyone that attempts to cross his path during his quest for vengeance. Number 6, Franken Castle. After he was taken off the board by Daken on orders from Norman Osborn during the Dark Reign event, Frank Castle, yes, the Punisher, was revived by the Legion of Monsters as an undead zombie-like monster known as Franken Castle. The Legion resurrected Frank to recruit him in their fight against the villain known as Hellsguard, who was systematically taking out monsters using samurai-like assassins. Although he originally refused to help them, Frank got involved after seeing some innocent little monsters being dispatched too, and that is not something Frank is willing to abide. He went on to slay hordes of Hellsguard's men. It's honestly an incredibly interesting moment in Frank Castle's history, and it got this version of Frank moved to Earth 666. He also nearly enacted revenge against Daken, being stopped by Wolverine before he was returned to his human form through the Bloodstone. But he kept going on in 666, and it's really cool. Number 5, Marvel Universe versus the Punisher. In this universe, the Punisher interrupts an arms deal involving what he thinks is a briefcase nuke, only to discover that it is in fact a man-made virus that, for Frank Castle, makes him immune to infection, illness, and disease. That's pretty good, but it didn't quite do this for everyone else though. Problem here is that the chemical weapon found its way into the water supply and then into the food and started in New York, spreading to the whole world through infected travelers. And then it started turning people and heroes into starting with Spider-Man. An outbreak spread and led to insane events, including a war against the cannibals, who then became the dominant beings of this Earth. But the real star of the show is Frank Castle, the Punisher. This is one of the greatest and most brutal Punisher stories ever. It plays on many of his characters' flaws and strengths, but the story also shows him defeating so many different heroes who you and I have always wanted to see him face, and who we doubt he would actually be able to defeat, but he does it anyways. It's also a surprisingly deep story that has a ton of awesome moments. Definitely check it out. Number 4, Cosmic Ghost Rider. In the Thanos Wins story arc from writers Donny Cates and Jeff Shaw from Thanos Volume 2, one hero who ended up surviving the attack on the Earth by an alternate timeline Thanos was actually Frank Castle, but he did it in a bit of a different way. Frank was hit with debris and actually passed on pretty easily during the final stand against Thanos on Earth. Definitely a lame way to go. So once Frank made it to Hell, he made a deal with Mephisto to return to Earth for vengeance, and he was given the power to do just that as the Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance. Unfortunately, when this new Ghost Rider showed back up on Earth, everything was already lost. Being completely alone in the ruins of Earth, Frank went completely insane. Eventually, as he does, Galactus showed up, and being the only Earthling left alive, and a very powerful one at that, Frank made a deal. Galactus was allowed to have the Earth if Galactus made Frank his new herald, granting Frank the power cosmic as well as the spirit of vengeance. These two spent hundreds of years together until Thanos completely flattened Galactus. Then, Frank became King Thanos' #1 dude, going on time-hopping adventures and being completely awesome. Number 3, Space Punisher. In 2012, Marvel showed us a very different version of Frank Castle when they released a 4-issue run called Space Punisher. The series is nuts, super colorful, and heavily inspired by the pulpy sci-fi of the 1950s. There's an awesome robotic sidekick, insane versions of Marvel superheroes and supervillains, including an absolutely monstrous and terrifying version of the Hulk, but it's all centered around a ponytailed, laser sword, blaster-wielding version of the Punisher who finds himself facing space werewolves, space fascists, and space supervillains. It is worth noting, however, that this little weird Punisher story was divisive as hell. Very different from anything before it, Space Punisher was unique to say the least, but It's a comic book. If you can get past the weirdness, it's kind of enjoyable. Number 2, Netflix. We have had 3 movies of debatable quality that have brought Frank Castle to the screen. And while Ray Stevenson and Thomas Jane, and I guess Dolph Lundgren did decent jobs as Frank Castle, when Jon Bernthal showed up as the Punisher in the 2nd season of Netflix's acclaimed Daredevil show, he did it better than anyone before him. Or, at least for me, it was the most believable version of the Punisher I had ever seen on a screen. Bernthal brought fury and intensity at all times, almost to the point of seeming positively insane, especially when compared with the morals of Matt Murdock. His character was also incredibly capable and brutal, as is necessary for the Punisher to work. When he got his own show in 2017, it brought everything to a whole different level, telling a conspiracy story that also took a really good look at PTSD in soldiers, while also bringing the right amount of brutality that you'd expect from a Punisher story. Even my mom liked this show, and she doesn't even read comics. That's the highest praise I know how to give. And coming in at number 1, Punisher Max. Punisher Max was an adult comic, and for a guy whose main thing is ushering people to the pearly gates, it makes sense that this setting suits his character best. Removing the Punisher from all the costumes and superpowers of the regular Marvel universe and dropping him right into an America facing the early days of the War on Terror, it kicked off with the CIA trying to recruit Frank, which sets off a hugely violent political game. This Frank Castle was a veteran of the Cold War, running Black Ops alongside Nick Fury in Vietnam, and he is not someone you want to mess around with. Like, he lights out Microchip during the first storyline just for helping the CIA to even find Frank Castle. His enemies here are also much more threatening and scarily realistic compared to anything that Earth-616 has thrown at the Punisher. With a big shout out to Barracuda specifically, another former soldier just as ruthless and skilled as Frank is. Punisher Max shows the very real physical and emotional damage that Frank Castle's crusade would cause him in real life, obviously with a tiny suspension of disbelief that comes with a comic book. If you choose to give it a read, just be warned that it is extremely graphic, and you shouldn't read it unless you're over the age of, like, I'd say 18.
In at 10, Jim Gordon. In the wake of Batman's apparent death against the Joker, plans for a new Batman were discussed. With Powers International laying the groundwork for a Batman-inspired task force, their first candidate chosen to model the program was Jim Gordon, who was initially hesitant to fill Batman's shoes but eventually agreed. Going through intense government training and getting surgical muscle implants, Gordon was given the first model of the new Batman robot armor, which he nicknamed Rookie, and took to the streets as the new Batman. By complete chance, he finds Bruce Wayne and informs him that he has taken up the reins as Batman, and as Gordon hears several different reports about Bruce Wayne being found dead throughout Gotham, he works with Batman to figure out that a Batman from an alternate dark universe, known as the Batman Who Laughs, is the one responsible. Tracking him down, Gordon seeks help from his estranged son, James Jr. However, another dark version of Batman arrives and introduces himself as the Grim Knight. But it's certainly jarring to see Batman go from this big bulky hero to a lanky Jim Gordon. He looks fragile, but I mean still, it's kinda dope that Gordon becomes Batman. In at 9, Flashpoint. Thomas Wayne's Batman from the Flashpoint timeline is a fascinating and tragic character, and honestly, one of my favorite versions of Batman. In this alternate universe, it was Bruce Wayne who was killed in the alleyway, causing his father, Thomas, to become Batman instead. Unlike his son's more traditional superhero version, Thomas Wayne's Batman operates more like a vigilante, using brutal and even lethal tactics to take down his enemies. He's a hardened and embittered figure who has given up hope for justice in a world riddled with corruption and violence. And I mean, given his origin, I kinda get it. I understand why. Despite his brutal methods though, Thomas is driven by a deep sense of love and protection for his wife Martha, who has gone insane and actually become the Joker in this reality after the loss of their son. He'll stop at nothing to try and save her, even if it means crossing moral boundaries. Thomas Wayne's Batman is a dark and tragic twist on the traditional Batman mythology, and he reminds us that the choices we make, even the ones made with the best intentions, can have unforeseen and devastating consequences. But also he killed Reverse Flash, which is pretty dope. And it ain't Lord Starkill. Peter Quill, known as Lord Starkill in his home universe of Earth 25271, was a notorious space pirate and leader of the Ravagers. He had a personal vendetta against Corporal Carol Danvers, the leader of the rival Zeta flight pirates. Thanos the Just was a wise and noble peacekeeper who had hired Quill to retrieve a displaced reality stone from another universe. Quill laid in wait on the planet of Gaia, anticipating the emergence of Dr. Eve and her MIM unit from an ancient temple with the reality stone, and with his trusty element rifle he skillfully incapacitated both targets from a safe distance and then claimed the stone for himself. During his journey back to the hideout, Quill contacted Thanos, much to the latter's dismay, as he preferred not to be associated with the individuals of Quill's reputation, but upon his return the hideout was suddenly attacked by the Zetas with assistance from Widower. The Ravagers valiantly fought back, managing to restrain the entire enemy team, but in a controversial move, Lord Starkill proposed selling his nemesis and her crew to Thanos to clear his own name. That's definitely a cutthroat move, and you know what, Quill? I respect it. Those are the kind of go-get-em attitudes we need in space. And at 7, Gamora. Following the presumed demise of Peter Quill, Gamora donned his mask and assumed the mantle of Star-Lord on Earth TRN-421, taking charge as leader of the Guardians of the Galaxy. The team consisted of Drax, Groot, Rocket, Iron Man, and Charlie-27. Their mission was to confront the formidable Silver Galactus, who had absorbed the power of the Silver Surfer and become even more ravenous than ever before. And at the Forsaken Gates of Asgard, where the gods were absent, the Guardians faced off against their former teammate Vance Astro, who had become the latest Herald of Galactus. Vance deployed an army of Punisher robots to keep the Guardians occupied while his master targeted their base at Nowhere. Meanwhile, Quill, who was assumed dead, had cleverly faked his demise and taken on the persona of Major Victory, infiltrating the ranks of the Heralds of Galactus to earn the trust of Silver Galactus. So, damn. And at 6, Nova. Star-Lord and his partner Gamora, both of Earth 94241, were a daring duo with a shared mission to locate the elusive Infinity Stones. Their first successful heist involved stealing the Space Stone from the devastated Nova HQ, which had fallen victim to the Annihilation Wave. Their triumph was short-lived, as they found themselves pursued by the relentless Bacchian clan. In a surprising turn of events, Star-Lord managed to strike a deal with Eve Bacchian, convincing her to purchase the Space Stone in exchange for 3 coveted Nova Stars. Sounds like I'm playing Mario Party. Discovering that their goals were aligned, both parties seeking to rid the universe of the Annihilation Wave as well, the Bacchians allowed Star-Lord and Gamora to join their quest in search of the remaining stones. During their perilous journey, a treacherous betrayal unfolded when their supposed ally Thanos seized the Infinity Stones that they had acquired, and then in the ensuing chaos, a colossal insectoid threat was unleashed, which is pretty freaking nuts and honestly kind of epic. Why would you trust Thanos though? I guess it's an alternate universe, so oh well. Halfway through into number 5, Super Mario. Now this one is kind of a joke, yes, but since Mario was voiced by Chris Pratt in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, technically that makes Mario a Star-Lord variant, right? I mean, a load of Mario games also revolve around stars or include them as some form of currency or whatever the case may be. Super Mario Galaxy revolved around stars quite literally. I mean, like, it was in space. Galaxy kinda needs stars in a galaxy. Luna, who's a character in the series, is a star. Rosalina has the star wand. Mario's main goal in Mario Party is to collect stars, which are highly coveted. He's a Lord of Stars, and given that he's voiced by Chris Pratt, and when in contact with a superstar, Mario gains invulnerability and what is basically celestial adjacent powers, or some would say celestial descendant powers. Yeah, I'm gonna count Super Mario as a Star-Lord variant, okay? And if you want to get mad at me for it, go right ahead. I'm sure plenty of you want to give me a piece of your mind already anyway. And for Cyborg, after the events on Aveline 4, where Star-Lord's actions inadvertently caused the loss of 350,000 lives while saving millions of others, he couldn't escape the weight of the collateral damage that he had caused. Faced with the gravity of his actions, he made the difficult decision to turn himself in, along with the Fallen One, to the Nova Corps for judgment. The public's opinion of Quill was divided, but he took responsibility for the tragedy. Subsequently, both Star-Lord and the Fallen One had found themselves imprisoned on the notorious intergalactic penitentiary known as the Kiln. It was during this time of confinement that Peter made a significant choice. He opted to undergo his first cybernetic implant, a symbolic gesture of distancing himself from his own humanity, because I mean that's what put him in there in the first place, really. While incarcerated, Peter formed an alliance with Chalk, Gladiator, and Thanos, fearing the immense power of the enigmatic figure known as the Maker. They shared crucial information about her background with Thanos and sought his aid, but the Mad Titan ultimately walked away. But still, he became a cyborg, and that's pretty dope, because, you know, part robot people are awesome, a la Power Rangers Red Ranger. You know, if you know, you know. Getting close to the end, and at number 3, Old Man Quill. Prior to Red Skull's rise to power and the downfall of the United States, Star-Lord assumed the role of Emperor within the Spartax Empire. During his time, he entered into a union with Lyssa, who gave birth to their 2 children, Meredith and Jason. Though his responsibilities as Emperor prevented him from joining the Guardians on a critical mission that led to Groot's demise, the decision strained his relationship with the rest of the team. In the aftermath of the rebellion and the subsequent years as Emperor, Star-Lord remained unaware of the events unfolding on Earth. However, everything changed when the colossal Church of Truth launched a brutal assault on his planet, resulting in the tragic loss of his family. So, consumed by grief and despair, Quill lived in seclusion for years, cutting off from the Guardians and the wider universe. Then, a message arrived from the dying Guardians, revealing that Star-Lord represented the last hope to defeat the Church. And I mean like the one that had attacked his planet, not like Cavalry Baptist, you know. But ultimately, and at number 2, Age of Ultron. Star-Lord of Earth 26111 is a valiant member of the Defenders who was enlisted by Tony Stark to safeguard the world from the relentless menace posed by Morgan Le Fay. Alongside his fellow Defenders, he engaged in a fierce battle with Wolverine and the Invisible Woman from an alternate reality, mistakenly believing them to be Skrull imposters. As Tony Stark interrogated the displaced visitors, tragedy struck when Morgan Le Fay launched a devastating assault on New York City. Star-Lord and his fellow Defenders valiantly confronted the Sorceress and her formidable forces. However, their heroic efforts came to a tragic end when Morgan Le Fay orchestrated the cataclysmic nuclear explosion caused by colliding 2 of Stark's helicarriers. So I mean, yeah, any old man story you know is gonna be messed up. Old Man Logan, Maestro, Spider-Man Reign. And finally, in at number 1, Will Stronghold. That's right, I found a way to shoehorn Sky High into this list, okay? Will Stronghold is the main protagonist and central character of the Disney Channel original movie Sky High. As the offspring of 2 esteemed superheroes, the Commander and Jetstream, Will carries the weight of their legacy on his shoulders. Inheriting his father's incredible strength and his mother's ability to soar through the skies, Will proved to be quite the formidable student at Sky High. But he doesn't start off with powers. So he's the only kid at a school full of the children of superheroes and villains alike to not have any superpowers, despite having 2 superhero parents who are literally the most famous people on the planet. But over time, Will sheds his shyness and timidness, and he grows more confident and actually gains his powers. Through his journey, he gains popularity as well, but also earns the respect and admiration of his fellow students and even teachers. Will's evolution allows him to stand as a true hero, carving his own path and giving his friends hope, who, by the way, one of them is Danielle Panabaker, who plays Killer Frost on The Flash, but she was playing Poison Ivy in this movie. But the reason I have Will on this list is because the legacy that he's trying to uphold is that of the Commander, played by Kurt Russell, who also played Ego, meaning that within the Marvel multiverse, Will Stronghold is a variant of Star-Lord. You're welcome. I had to do it, okay? I had to. It's true. Will Stronghold is Star-Lord confirmed.